Welcome Nashua and beyond into the Picker's Corner again. I am Scott from Picker's Paradise here in Nashua. And the last time we were talking about the Laughlin Pottery Company, or China Company. They started from meager beginnings in 1871 with two brothers who got a $5,000 grant from the city of East Liverpool, Ohio, to start up a white pottery company rather than the yellowware pottery that was being made in that area at the time. And we left off, it was around 1905, 1906, when they were starting up their fourth plant, which is now across the Ohio River from East Liverpool over in Newell, West Virginia. And if you remember correctly, they bought a large tract of land from the Newell family, created their own town. Now 1905, 1906, they got their first plant opened up over there, their fourth plant and all. And this one is the largest pottery plant in the world. I think we spoke of that last time. And it's the combined capacity now between the four plants that they're running is about 300,000 pieces of pottery per day. So we'll pick up there. So fast forward another year. In 1907, the company decides they're going to move their headquarters from East Liverpool across the Ohio River over to Newell, West Virginia. And this is where the headquarters of the company will stay until present day. So in 1914, a few more years in the future, they opened up plant number 5. Everything at this point, the new construction is all being built in Newell at this time. East Liverpool is just continuing to run at this point, and do their own thing. So now in 1914, after the number 5 plants open, they have a total of about 138 kilns running between the 5 operations they have going. And in 1916, I actually found this tidbit in some research I was doing, that in that year, the Woolworth Company, in a letter from Laughlin, China, to the Woolworth Company, is thanking them for their business for the year of 1916, in which the Woolworth Company spent $1 million with the brothers, or with the Laughlin Company. And just to give you an idea of the pricing at the time, what $1 million would have looked like physically. So they were selling pottery to the Woolworth Company at 72 cents per dozen pieces. So if you do the math, $1 million worth of sales at 72 cents per dozen, you're looking at about 16.7 million pieces of pottery that were sold to Woolworth in 1916 alone. So at this point, this company that has been started by these two brothers, basically with free money, has grown to this company that's its largest clients are spending $1 million with them per year in 1916, which is pretty impressive. I don't know what that'd be in today's money, but that's a lot of money. So in the early 1920s now, a few years later, the pottery industry is really starting to grow. They're starting to mechanicalize. We're getting into a time period where a lot of things are starting to be considered more of process oriented. So they actually created a continuous firing kiln. So the continuous firing kiln started at this time, and basically, I don't know if you've ever seen or watched any kind of kiln operation that you'd see these days in modern times, but pretty much it's like a track that the pottery is just constantly going through this big oven on. So these continuous firing kilns really amp up the amount of production. If you can keep that kiln running all the time and keep that conveyor belt moving the pottery through, it's pretty much you can start printing your own money. Rather than what they used to do in the old days with the kilns, you load it up as much as you can based on the size of the kiln. It's got to run for a certain time, and that's all you get out of that production over that period of time, out of that kiln over that period of time. So in 1924, the Laughlin Company starts opening plant number 6. Now plant number 6 actually has the continuous firing kilns, and they also go back in that year and they retrograde plants 4 and 5, which are both in Newell as well, up to the same standard with the continuous firing kilns. In 1927, they opened plant number 7. 1929, they opened plant number 8. So the company you see is every year, or every couple of years, they're opening up another plant The company's booming, the business is great. And if you remember your time period, now this is all leading up to the Great Depression, which starts in around 1929 to 1939, the beginning of when the US gets into World War II. So in 1929, plant number 8, their largest, which at the time, if you remember back, we just talked about how plant number 4, when they built it about 20 years before, was the largest in the world. So this one, 20 years later, is their largest. So it is larger than the one that was the largest in the world less than 20 years before that, or about 20 years before that. So at this time, being able to open up a plant like that, they pretty much take plant number 8 with its 800 employees, and all they're making is pottery for Woolworth. And with the additional productivity they have with plants 4 through 8 now, they close the original 3 plants in East Liverpool permanently. I don't know if that was predicated by maybe a drop in sales due to the Depression starting in 1929. It doesn't really get into that. But at this time, now all the operations are in Newell, West Virginia, as well as the company headquarters. So once the Depression, once we get into World War II as a country, most of the production from the Homer Laughlin company actually switched to making china and other things for the military. So there's not a whole lot of actual dinnerware being produced by the company from 1939 to 1945-ish during World War II. And so now we're past that, we're in 1945. 1948 is when they record their peak production. They have 3,000 total employees working for them, and they produce 10 million dozen pieces, or 120 million pieces per year at this point. So that is probably the largest china operation in the United States at that point, if not the world probably. 1950s, there's an increase in imported dinnerware at this time. We kind of talked about that when we were talking about the Depression glass a few weeks ago on the show, that the income coming back with the soldiers and the economic boom that followed the end of World War II, the baby boomers, all that kind of stuff. People started buying more expensive goods from Europe at that time. They had the extra money. They were buying things that were considered a little more fancy than what you could get domestically. And so at that time, once the demand for their dinnerware pottery started dropping, the Homer Laughlin company pivoted, and they increased the amount of commercial pottery they were making. Things for hotels, restaurants, diners, all that kind of stuff. They started marketing towards that and making more products in that vein. So you fast forward another 10 years, 1960s, 1970s, hotel and food service industry sales completely overtake the sales that they were having with the consumer dinnerware at the time. So they've not only just pivoted, now they've become more of a food service industry company 10 years after being at their max production in dinnerware. In the 1980s, the Homer Laughlin company started having all lead-free designs, or lead-free pigments, so there was no more worry about lead. And as you will see, if you look at Fiestaware pieces on the bottom, that's one good indication to date them, is the fact that if on the bottom it says lead-free anywhere on the Fiesta piece or Homer Laughlin pieces in general, you'll know that it was produced in the 1980s or after. In the 2000s, Fiesta's popularity came back up a bit, and they were also at that time a leader in the food service china industry. So now they're starting to have the comeback of the traditional dinnerware, as well as now they've created the reputation and have the volume that they're pretty much the world's largest commercial china company. In 2010, the Homer Laughlin company bought the Hall China Company, which was pretty much a neighbor at that time, and Hall had been in operation not nearly as long as Homer Laughlin at this point, but we're a long-standing China company for the food service industry. In 2020, Homer Laughlin actually sells its food service division. Now, like we were just saying, it had grown this into one of the largest companies to do food service, China, around. And so now in 2020, they actually sell off that division to Steelite International. And the Homer Laughlin company, they sell off the Homer Laughlin name along with the food service portion, because the Homer Laughlin name has become synonymous with Good Food Service China. So they want to keep the name going. And so the Homer Laughlin company technically becomes now the Fiesta Tableware Company, with Fiestaware being their main product line. Now, at this point, the Homer Laughlin Company / the Fiesta Tableware Company has been in business for about 151 years. And during that time, it is estimated that the number of different patterns that they've created is somewhere in the 25,000 to 35,000 range. So it's just mind-boggling that they've come up with that many designs. And as we were talking about with the Fiestaware, the designer was one of their best. And as you can see, a couple of the pieces I brought with me here, they might look like the Fiestaware, but they're actually not. They're more of those pieces that were designed in that same time era. Some of the most popular Homer Laughlin patterns are the oven serve, the Fiesta Kitchen Craft, which is very similar to the Fiesta, the Harlequin, which actually this little covered casserole dish here, this is actually a piece of the Harlequin. And as you can see, it's got the concentric circles that a lot of the Fiestaware also has. So a lot of times, a lot of these actually do get a little bit confused with the Fiestaware. If you flip it over, see it's not really marked. It's something that you need to go through a catalog for and really look at some different sources to figure out exactly which pattern it is, because a lot of the Art Deco patterns that came out in that time frame might look very similar to Fiesta. They also came out with a Riviera pattern, Century pattern, Eggshell, both Georgian and Nautilus versions, and a Virginia Rose. And one that I didn't mention is the Rhythm, which was one of the ones I think that was a little bit later. This Rhythm platter here, it is marked on the backside, Rhythm by Homer Laughlin, along with I think a number of which pattern or which size piece this is. As you can see, it's got no lines like it does before. This was a mid-century piece, probably from the 1950s. And if we go back here over to this Harlequin, is probably from somewhere in the late 1940s to the 1960s. And if you flip this one over, there's actually a 57 imprinted on the bottom. So it's likely a 1957 created piece. Moving on, I actually wanted to talk a little bit this week about some of the picking techniques and things that I do for my fall strategies, and maybe we'll get into some winter strategies as well. So things change up a little bit in the fall and the winter. Actually, every season in picking is a little bit different, at least in the way that I go forward and look to do things. So the first thing that I do in the fall, I like to try to get all my yard sales in. Yard sales in the fall are usually, I find, a little bit more productive. Usually the volume's a little bit down. The amount of people going out's a little bit down. So you kind of get a situation where things are less crowded, and also usually people are a little busier. Kids are back in school, things of that nature. They're not out looking for things to do on Saturday and Sunday mornings. I also find that some of the best prices of the season are in the fall. A lot of the times people have been wanting to do a yard sale all year. They have all this crap that's in their garage, supposed crap that's in their garage or other places, and they want to get rid of it before the winter hits. They don't want to have to store it again for another year. So you do find some of your best prices in this time of the year. So when I go out yard selling, the first thing I like to do is I got to do research. I'm a research guy. I find it makes the best use of my time and money. So I go on a few different places. Facebook is always great. There's multiple places to look for yard sales on Facebook. There's the marketplace listings themselves. Then there's also sites that are all about yard selling. There's town-wide yard sale sites, which basically post the town-wide yard sales for most of the towns in the Northeast here, from basically Massachusetts, Connecticut, all the way up through Maine. You can find whatever's going on for community-wide yard sales, which is one of the things I like to do every once in a while because it gives you a lot of volume in a small area, especially with the way gas prices are these days. You don't have to drive around a whole lot looking for the things you want at that time. But the other thing you got to do is stay focused. So the other part of doing the research is not just finding where the yard sales are, it's finding where the good ones are. So you got to do a little bit of reading, a little bit of research. It's going to take some time. Usually what I do is I'll start building a map. I'll start writing down addresses of the yard sales that I feel like will give me the best bang for my buck and my time. The ones that seem like they're a little bit larger, or they mention having items that I'm actually looking for at the time. Those will be the ones that I'll star on my list. And once I get done literally going through all the listings and compiling all the different yard sales I might want to go to, I usually list them by town and try to throw them all up on a map literally on my computer. So I'll have as many tags on a map that I can get on my Google map or whatever. I start drawing, different direction patterns to try to find how I can make the best use of my time with the least amount of driving between all the different stops I want to make. You also have to factor in the times that the yard sales run. Try to hit some of the ones if you want to start early. Highlight the ones that are the 7 a.m. starts, 8 a.m. starts, and then as you go through, you can hit the ones that start later. So that's the first thing I like to do in the fall, is look for the yard sales. Second thing is the flea markets. Most of the flea markets around here will run till the end of October. And it's funny because a lot of people do ask me, how late does the flea go in the year? And when I tell them the end of October, a lot of people are surprised. Well, low customer volume usually means better pricing. So flea markets, especially when the weather gets a little cold, not only is there a lower volume of people out there buying, there's also more of a need for the folks who are selling to get rid of their things, because again, if they're doing this for some kind of a business or a hobby on the side, they want to get rid of as much as they can before the next year, because then they'll have to store it over the winter if they do the flea markets pretty much every week. So it's your time to really go in and wheel and deal. And one of the ways I find is the easiest to wheel and deal is bundle. If you find a vendor at a flea market who looks like their prices are pretty good, you ask about a couple pieces, kind of feel them out on how they feel about what they're asking compared to what you think the retail price is. Then just start snatching up as much as you can, try to make a bulk offer, or have them, tell you what they think is fair for the amount of stuff that you put together. And a lot of times in the fall, you'll come away with a lot of great stuff, especially larger items, larger physical items, for really good prices. Next thing I look for in the fall is estate sales. There don't seem to be as many as there are during the middle of the summer. Again, that's the time when everybody thinks about having them, when the estate sale companies are at their busiest. So the late year estate sales, a lot of times when you're moving into the fall, it's an estate sale for someone who kind of missed the rush, wanted to do it during the summer, never got around to it, was late getting to the estate sale company to book something, so they start sliding off into the fall. And a lot of times as motivated sellers for these estate sales, because a lot of times it is that case where they've let it slide and now they need to get rid of things. Or it's to the point where it's something that's come up abruptly, house sale, job move, something like that, where they have to pretty much liquidate most of what they have. So the estate sales in the fall, my third favorite place to look. And then of course, There's thrift stores. I love thrift stores. Thrift stores are always good, especially if they're the ones that you know have good turnover and always have decent pricing. And one of the good things about thrift stores is a lot of times some of them will have little clearance sales here and there, or if they have different color tags, it's good to follow what's going on sales-wise and volume-wise at your thrift stores that you frequent, because if you like going there already, you'll like going there even more when you can find things half off, 25%, whatever the discount is. Now things switch up a little bit in the winter. Now it's a little bit early to start talking about winter strategies, but it's never too early to start doing your research, because with winter strategies, there's not much going on outside. You're not going to be driving down the road looking for road gold on the side of the road. You're not going to be finding random yard sales, or even any yard sales for that matter. The flea markets, there's a few indoor ones that are around the area, but other than that, your options are really limited by the weather. So the winter becomes a computer game, pretty much, of picking at that point, unfortunately. But if you got to have something to do over the winter, it's going to be mostly online. So the first thing that I like to do, well, actually, hold on, let's take one step back. My cautionary tale with the winter is usually the winter you find less volume, as we were just talking about, but you also find higher prices. I try to do most of my buying for the shop in the months where I can get the better deals, or when better deals come along. Stock up when you can, hold on to the inventory, sell it when prices are typically higher. That's pretty much the game. That's how you make things work in this industry. So in the winter, the things you usually find in the winter are a lot smaller volume. So you find online estate sales, and online sales in general, online auctions. A lot of times those auctions and things are small lots if they're not just one particular item. So it really changes the game when you're looking at an auction at an estate or something like that, or a business that's having an auction online, that the amount of items that they're listing is much smaller than what you'd find at a yard sale or an estate sale at some points. And the fact that every item is being sold individually and you're bidding against pretty much everybody who has a computer who might be available to go pick it up and is willing to pay that amount of money, it really changes the game. A lot of times when you're at flea markets and yard sales, the expectation for pricing is relatively low. The expectation when you start getting into online, you're really starting to bid against people who aren't in it to flip things. You're in it against the collectors. You're in it against your own customers, basically. So you really need to be more cautious with your spending. And a lot of times the thing that is different about online, that is much different, is your ability to actually go up, touch, and feel and inspect the item. You're buying things online based on the pictures you see, the descriptions you have. So when you're working with a site, one of the things I find is it takes some time to get used to the standards of the site and how they run, what the pictures are like, how close are their descriptions and the pictures to the actual items when you get there and physically see them. So word of caution, start slow when you're buying online, especially if you haven't dealt with that company before, or it's someone that you're not completely familiar with. Just bid lightly, bid amount of money that if the item ends up not being exactly what you want, that you won't be disappointed, or that you won't be throwing your money away. So the online estate sales, there are a few different sources for that. The one that I use for my own business to sell through during the winter times, which is my replacement for the going to the flea market and selling, is through the Max Sold website. They're an online estate sale company. Now they do two different kinds of estate sales, they host two different kinds of estate sales on their website. The first type is the estate sales that the Max Sold company actually goes out and does themselves. So those are the auctions where I'm Susie homeowner, I want to sell everything, I'm moving across the country, I don't need any of this stuff anymore, I'm moving from a house to an apartment, something like that. I hire Max Sold to come in, create the lots, take the pictures, be there for the pickups at the end of the sale. They basically run everything. So there's those types of sales, and then there's the seller managed sales. Me as a business owner, that's the thing I do. I'm the seller, I manage the whole thing. I take the pictures, I do the descriptions. I'm the face you see when you come to pick your items up after you've won them in the auction. So the thing that you start feeling out with the way that the auctions are created is that the auctions that are done by Max Sold, they are basically taking everything that the owner does not want and creating their own lots. And so what you get sometimes is things that might not really go together in certain lots, or you get larger, higher value lots of items that you would in a seller managed sale. Usually a seller managed sale, and I can say this is guilty of my own sales too, the more valuable, higher price items are typically not in the seller managed sales online on Max Sold. So you really got to kind of be aware of what you're seeing and who's selling it also. Some of the seller managed auctions are done very well. The pictures are fantastic. It's a professional company that's doing it in association with Max Sold. Sometimes it's someone like myself who's in the industry, who understands that to get the most for the products that you have, the pictures need to be good, the descriptions need to be good, you need to point out the flaws, that kind of thing, to really create some kind of certainty with your buyers that they know what they're getting. So when you're looking at your online sales this winter, there's a little tip for you. And then also, there's also like Auction Ninja and estatesales.net. Those are other good online estate sale auctions to check out. I'll throw a couple other winter tips out there in my next session as well. Maybe I'll wrap up the next session with that. But thanks again for joining me, and good picking.